Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Bennington with the Circle of Atonement, and I'm here with Robert Perry. And today we are talking about what we've learned about holy relationships. It's no secret that we all live in a world that is very deeply divided. And if we are to save it, and we must, we have to reverse the thinking that has gotten us to this place of near universal polarization. And what has brought us to this place is thinking that we are just a collection of separated selves, each running around trying to fulfill our own individual needs. So, in other words, what has brought us to this place of division is the thinking of the ego. In the course, learning how to join with another person is central to transcending the ego, which makes joining central to our spiritual development. It's the kind of joining that the course calls a holy relationship that is meant to become an incubator in which we learn the lessons of love and forgiveness that we need on our spiritual path. And then, having learned these lessons with our holy relationship partner, we can then extend the same love and forgiveness to others. And this is the course's plan for healing the separation of our world. We join and we learn how to love, and then we extend that love to others. And this makes sense, doesn't it? If the problem of the world is separation, then it would be fitting that the solution would be joining. And this is why we believe that relationships are the next chapter in spiritual evolution. Marianne Williamson once said that relationships are the next great spiritual frontier. And I love that language. We say it here all the time. It is not enough to seek for God in solitude and isolation. That has its place. But to call ourselves truly spiritually advanced, we have to know how to get along. The Course says the ark of peace is entered 2 by 2, and yet the beginning of another world goes with them. It's the relationships that are formed in our homes and in our businesses and in our schools and in our politics. If we can make them holy, meaning if we can make them reflections of God's love and forgiveness, then we will have that beginning of another world. And we desperately need that, as we can all see. So Robert and I have been talking about holy relationships for a very long time. We've done classes about it, podcasts, workshops, and we talk about holy relationships a lot because this is such an important teaching in the course. But of course, we also have our own holy relationship. As of this recording, we've been together as a couple for over 3 years now. We just recently got engaged to be married. And so we thought that this would be a good time to pass along some of the things that we've learned about being in a holy relationship ourselves. And we just want to be really clear that we're not making this podcast about us. We're not here to offer the intimate details of our personal relationship, but we do feel that we have acquired some knowledge that might be helpful to you in your own holy relationships or relationship in general, and we're happy to pass it along. So, Robert, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah, Robert's not very used to talking about himself, and the whole concept makes him squirm. But so let's start bigger picture. Let's just start for anyone who is new to the course or who just needs a refresher. Let's just talk briefly about the definition of a holy relationship. And just to be clear, it doesn't have to be a romantic partnership, although it very often is, right?
It often is, but what's interesting to me, and I often point out, is that the course has 3 really big examples of holy relationships. There's Helen and Bill's relationship, which is the focus of the text discussions of holy relationships. There is the relationship between teacher and pupil in the Manual for Teachers, and between therapist and patient in the psychotherapy supplement. And out of those three examples in the Course itself, none of them are romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm. So how does the Course define holy relationships?
Well, the Course talks about holy relationships consistently throughout as two people. It takes two who join in a common goal or a common purpose, something that transcends the ego. And that joining in a common goal invites the Holy Spirit into their relationship to make it holy. And what he does is he kind of plants holiness deep in the relationship. The Course also talks about him laying peace deep in the relationship. And then that holiness, that peace attempts to rise up and engulf the surface level, the conscious level of the relationship. So the two people go on this journey towards, you could say, manifesting or embodying holiness between them. They experience increasing oneness where the separateness falls away. And the Course talks a lot about them joining in a common function, having a special function that they share together in God's plan to save the world. So they join personally, but they also join in some sense in carrying out a function together in the world. And all of this you see with Helen and Bill, right? They did not have great success in the personal joining, but they did have a definite common function in that they together brought A Course in Miracles into the world.
So the idea of the Holy Spirit coming into one's personal relationship is truly fascinating, because when the Holy Spirit enters, it's like there's a third presence there with the two of you, and the Holy Spirit comes in with his own goal to be achieved through the two of you. And that's a unique thing. Obviously, we don't tend to think of our relationships as being a vehicle through which the Holy Spirit can achieve his goals in the world. But the Course makes it clear that that's part of what a holy relationship is, right?
Well, yeah, the whole idea of the third presence, which is not a term in the Course, but it so captures, I think, what goes on in holy relationships. That's central. It's his presence that makes the relationship holy, you could say. And then part of what he's trying to do, part of what he's trying to do, you could say, is bring those two people on a path of development in which they learn to shed their separateness and join with each other. And then the other part of what he's trying to do is he's trying to bring them together so that they actually work together in some way, like Helen and Bill did to bring the Course into the world. They work together to carry out a meaningful purpose in the world. And I think those two streams of his activity are very intimately intertwined.
So, how do you know when someone has entered your life and this is a holy relationship? What are the markers of a higher hand at work?
Yeah, I think that it's holy. I think there's all kinds of ways of knowing that, but I think that there's just that the first part of it is there are things associated with when the two people first come together, first meet each other, that are some of the important markers of a holy relationship. For instance, I think that, and I think so many of us have experienced this, where when you first meet that person, there are events associated with that. When you're first meeting, first getting to know them, first learning about them, that are often very serendipitous, very synchronistic. It feels like something is going on beyond the normal happenstance that seems so random in our lives usually. So that's one thing. Another thing, and I think, again, a lot of people have experienced this, is when you first meet and start getting to know that person, it feels like there's a connection that's already been established. Like you haven't had to forge this whole connection. It's sort of there out of the box, right? And there's still, a lot to be done there in forging something, yet it feels like it comes already formed, already made. And then another thing I think is that there's almost a feeling in the air that there is something more going on here. It's, like at certain times of the year, certain times of day, there's a quality of light in the air that's a little bit different. And I think that's sort of a metaphor for what happens in these relationships where there's a quality in the air of like something more is going on here that's indefinable and subjective, but you feel it.
Yeah, and there's a real depth to it as well. I think sometimes when we meet someone new that we're excited about, we get lost in the surface level excitement. And from my experience with holy relationships, you come together and there's this like super deep knowing. So it's not so much that you're just so excited to have found someone that you really get along with. It's like oh, there you are. I feel like
Right.
I've known you for a long time and now I've found you and wow, there's so much gratitude in that. But it's not this just like this like buzzy excitement that we tend to get when we're just like, let's say, physically attracted to someone, you know?
It feels like there's more. I have had that experience, of course, of feeling like I know you. I can't put my finger on from where, um,
Hmm.
which is a more specific version of that. There's a connection here, and it's already made. You
Hmm.
know, but I think, and this is, speaks to lessons learned. When that happens, you have to watch out because it's very powerful. When you feel like there's something here that is of God, when you feel like there's a connection here that is very old and very strong, it's very powerful and you can get swept up in it. And, that happened to us. We made some big mistakes early on, that we have tried hard to correct, make up for, to learn from. We have a life's worth of lessons from the mistakes we made, and we just got really swept up in the power of the relationship. And we are the very first to say that we didn't handle it right. So, like, beware.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because for all of my noting that, yes, the connection's very deep and it feels like it's coming from this truly foundational, guided place, and it's different than the buzzy excitement of someone you're just so thrilled to meet. Both of those things were going on, and you can get totally swept up in it. And yeah, we did certainly make some mistakes in the beginning of our relationship, just getting so swept away in it. And
Yeah. And you
yeah.
have to remember there are other people that are affected.
Yeah, well, so part of the benefit of this discussion is you and I have reflected just endlessly. Honestly, not a day goes by where we don't have some kind of reflection on the lessons learned from this whole experience, and we're continually learning them all the time. And we've got some boilerplate language that we've developed that is sort of shorthand for these lessons and what this relationship is in our lives. We call it the three legs of the stool. And this has been very helpful in keeping us steady. And so we thought that the three legs of the stool would be the main structure for the discussion today. So three legs isn't language from the course, but the principles that we associate with it are. So the
Don't think
three
there are any stools in the
yeah,
course.
we did a word study on the
Yeah,
zero
right.
words. So anyway, the three legs of the stool are personal, purpose, and path. And so we thought we would just take them one by one and talk about the lessons that we've learned within each. So let's talk about the personal dynamic of a holy relationship. What does that mean?
Yeah, what we mean in our shorthand for that leg of the stool is the attempt, which we associate with every relationship, but especially associate with the primary relationship like a marriage, is just that seeking for real joining, seeking for union, where you're trying to come together from your separate spaces into some facsimile of oneness. So that's what we mean by the personal leg of the stool.
Yeah, and when we were reflecting on, okay, what are the elements that make the personal side of relationship work? The thing we kept returning to is it's two people on a journey to shed their egos. And and that requires a real willingness to say, I'm going to set aside what it is that my ego wants right now. I'm going to set aside what it is, like this strong emotion that I'm feeling right now. I'm going to set aside the judgments and the grievances that are in my own head for the sake of this union. And that doesn't mean that you're spiritually bypassing or that you're not speaking up for what it is that you need in any given moment, but it's just that you value the joining more than you value winning at an individual level. And
Or getting what you want.
I think when it comes to the personal side of our relationship, we're good at doing that. And so when we look back on, okay, well, what's worked, that's huge. Being willing to say, I care about you more than I care about my ego in this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how, I'm not sure if it's our place to say that we're so good at that. But it's certainly a value that we've learned is crucial. And what I see as I look out at relationships and counsel that's out there, and there's a ton of it on how to make relationships work, is there's such a focus on, like, if you do this right, if you have the right kind of interaction and you use the right language, the right nonviolent language with responsible I statements, or, if you know how to negotiate, there's this thought that if you just behave in the right way, it can all work. And there's also the thought out there that, well, it's really the way that men are. That's the problem. Or it's really the way that women are. That's the problem. And what I feel like what's missing as I hear different people talk about how to make relationships work, what's missing is the understanding that what kills it all is the ego. It's the ego in everyone. It's the ego in men. It's the ego in women. It's the ego in each and every single one of us. And we all want joining. We all want closeness. We crave it. But the price is the willingness to let go of ego. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like the price, the one price we are least willing to pay, I think.
Yeah, and when you look out on what's in our collective culture about how to get along, I see a lot of, well, I'm a this on the Myers-Briggs, or I'm an Enneagram this number, and I have this kind of trauma in my background, and there's all kinds of reasons why, or I'm a woman, or I'm a man. There's all kinds of reasons why we think we can't get along, and we try and point to those as why. Well, I am a woman, so I behave this way. You're a man, so you behave this way. What I love about the course is that all of that is just wiped away. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with your ego as the enemy, and therefore you need to be vigilant about the egoic thoughts in your mind and root them out, because that's what's in the way of your joining. And
Right.
the more you look back at like your Myers-Briggs letters as reason for why you behave this way, it just feels like a total distraction. It's the ego. And so the more you realize that it's the ego that's standing between you and that other person, so you need to get that out of the way so you can have complete joining, then the
Right.
better off your relationships will be.
Yeah, I think that we carry a thought of not a conscious thought, but it's in this. It's the thought that my ego can stay intact. And if I just learn these behaviors and I like do the love languages and we learn how to have this correct interaction, and maybe you can do some changing for sure. I mean, you should change. But I can keep my ego intact, and all things considered, this can work. We can join, and we can join long term beyond the initial excitement of falling in love. We can join in a more deep way over time. It's not going to happen. You cannot keep your ego intact and experience increasing joining over time.
Yeah.
The two are mutually exclusive.
In our course companions text class recently, we came across that line in the course that says, mistake not truce for peace. And I think that within our relationships, there's a lot of truce, but not a lot of peace. And one other thing that we've learned is that part of getting to the peace is continual conversation. Like we just really honestly never stop talking. And part of, I think, in relationships, where you go wrong is someone gives up on the conversation element, and so therefore you stop talking. The issue that you have disagreed on is never resolved, and you end up with a truce because you come back at some point and kiss and make up, but you don't have real peace because there's no resolution there. And so where I think societally we've broken down is we don't know how to get the ego out of the way, as we're saying, but we also don't know how to communicate with each other. We don't know how to come back to the other person and say, I do really want to hear what it is that you're thinking right now, or I'm sorry, I don't mean to project this thing on you, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I just said. Or like we we have a failure in an understanding with how to communicate with each other, and I think that breaks down our relationships as well.
Yeah, I've gone through a whole thought process around conversation. One of the things, aside from noticing how powerful it can be in terms of two people like circling closer and closer together, I've noticed that, like in near-death experiences, what oftentimes happens is people go over to the other side, or at least so they say, and they have these long conversations, with a teacher figure, with Jesus, maybe, perhaps even with God, or with a group, kind of a soul family of people they see over there and remember, but didn't know in this lifetime. And so much of what goes on that is transformative in those NDEs is conversation. And that's given me a model, because think about the Course. The Course was a long conversation, right, between Jesus and Helen and Bill. And it got to be more and more one-sided, but it started out very much very two-sided, a conversation. And so I feel like that's a way, it gives us a way of looking at human conversation as not just being utilitarian, passing the time. It's a way in which, if you can extract a little bit of ego from each and every exchange, it can be a way where you circle closer and closer and closer on trivial issues, on meaningful issues, on the deepest issues of life, and you can join through conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really it. It's the being vigilant against the ego in your own mind and keeping the conversation going. Those feel like the legs of the personal leg of the stool. And the course is so helpful with that. I mean, I know personally, I have benefited so much from the course's teachings on not bringing the past into the present, being vigilant against the ego within my own mind so that I can correct it at that level without dumping it on you or anyone else. I have really personally benefited from looking beyond the error that or the mistake that someone's made to the truth of who they are, not holding on to mistakes and punishing that person for mistakes in the present. Nobody's perfect at any of this, but the course tells us how to address all of these things that I'm speaking to right now. And I think ultimately for me, what it leads up to is that truly beautiful teaching in the course where it's like, I don't have to hold on to any errors or mistakes that you have made because I know my true identity as a child of God. And because of that, you can't hurt me. And so I can hold myself in this place of not being hurt. And then that frees me and it frees you and it frees anyone that I'm in relationship with. And all of these things are resources. I want to say tips, but that's just way too base of a word for what's being offered here. It's true wisdom in how to get along. And we need all of that because if we're not joined in a personal relationship that works, we can't get to the next leg of the stool, which is purpose. And that's joining together in a shared purpose in the world. It's being that relationship that the Holy Spirit can use to achieve his goals. If you can't get along because your ego is just too entrenched, then your relationship isn't solid enough for the Holy Spirit or Jesus or God to work from. And so you need that personal in place for the second leg, which is purpose. So
Yeah. And there's so much that could be said about the personal side. We haven't
I know
mentioned trust, that's huge. Um,
gentleness.
yeah. So there's so much that could be said, but we need to go on to the second leg.
Yeah. So talk to us about purpose.
So the second leg, as we've always thought about it, is joining together in a shared purpose in the world where you're fulfilling a meaningful function that contributes to the lives of others that in some small way improves the world. And you're doing that together. So that's how we've always thought of the second leg. And I think that is we should think of that as part of relationship, right? We shouldn't think of that as some strange spiritual, like grafting on. Relationship should be not just joining personally, it should be also we face outward and we benefit the world together.
Yeah, we tend to think about relationship as just that personal piece. Do we get along? And how many people are really thinking, I want to come together with another person so that our relationship can become that vehicle for the Holy Spirit to achieve his goals in the world? And when I say so the Holy Spirit can achieve his goals in the world, really what I mean is what I said in the intro. How can we become models of love and forgiveness so that we can extend love and forgiveness to other people and have it contribute to the healing of the world?
Yeah.
And who thinks of relationship that way? Normally it's just, can we sit on the couch together and find something that we both want to watch? Right?
Yeah, I think the closest that this we come to this normally is obviously raising children. When you raise children, hopefully you're giving a gift to those children and to the world. We don't always think of it that way. I think we always do to some extent, but like that's one example of a larger principle. Like we should be not just facing each other, we should be facing outward to bring something of value to the world.
Yeah. And there's just something incredible about being joined with someone else for a shared purpose. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic, but when it is, it's just it it just there's so much meaning in it. Not a day goes by where we're not talking about how to help the course achieve what it's meant to achieve in the world. It just, we kind of breathe that throughout each day. And whatever purpose two people have in their own relationship, to share it and to carry it and to discuss it throughout the day just really does make each day feel full and meaningful.
It's, I think, a huge need we have. Like we need purpose. Everyone needs purpose. And to carry a purpose by yourself where you feel like no one quite shares that with you, even if they share little bits of it with you or certain slices of it with you, but no one shares the whole of it with you, it's a lonely feeling. You know, we talk about being at cross purposes with people. Being at cross purposes is painful. It's conflict, it's separation, it's aloneness. And yet we are at cross purposes to some degree with everyone. And to have someone where you really share the purpose, all of it, you share not just the sort of the exterior of it, the action dimension, but you share the feeling of it. You share the intent. There's something that is so satisfying about that. And I think we all need it. And we should just admit to ourselves what a deep need that is.
Right. We need it, and yet we're not really looking for it. And I think that's a key point. When we think about who we want to be in relationship with, how often do we think I want someone with whom I can carry a shared purpose in the world? I don't even think we think so much about that at an individual level. At least that's been my experience. My whole life has been like trying to sniff out meaning and trying to find something bigger than the job that I was holding at any given time. And so I think we want it, but we don't seek it as much as we should. And we certainly don't try and find a partner to help us carry these things in the world. It just doesn't feel like part of the relationship paradigm that we have right now. But I think I think again, it's the next thing for relationship. So marriage, for example, isn't just, do I get along with this person, but what can we do together? How can we come together to do something greater as a couple than we ever could have done individually and alone?
Right. And without that sense of shared purpose, there's an emptiness. Not a total emptiness, but there is something lacking if you're not basically pulling together towards something that is deeply meaningful to both of you.
Yeah. And then it's even more meaningful when you start to appreciate what the other person brings that you don't have, and vice versa. And so then it's not the two of you kind of jostling for how you're going to carry this thing, but you're swimming in harmony with your own gifts, and each individual gift is contributing to the whole, in again, in ways that you couldn't have done alone.
Yeah, I think that's a major issue. Like that's something that we've had to learn and keep learning, and we're still learning it. Like when you're sharing a purpose, one person's going to bring certain things, certain strengths to that. The other person's going to bring different strengths to that. And sometimes one person's strengths are going to kind of encroach on the other person's and and seem to threaten some aspect of what that person brings. And then what do you do with that? And I think, it's just territory where you have to navigate, where if your stance is all about these are my strengths, this is what I'm bringing, and it's about that, it's not going to work. You have to then, in addition to knowing your strengths and not apologizing for them and valuing them, you have to be really trying to see those alien strengths over on the other side and to support them and to help nurture them and to help provide a space for them. And when they come out and ask for some revision of what you're doing on your side, maybe that revision's needed. Maybe you need to kind of give way and alter the way you've done things for the sake of this person's strengths.
Yeah. So it feels like in the personal leg of the stool, that idea of keeping conversation going kind of no matter what is key. And here in the purpose leg, the idea of making room for the other person and their strengths and and your weaknesses, and being willing to learn from each other is key to carrying something bigger for the both of you.
Absolutely. And along those lines, I want to bring in a word that has become like a holy word to me over the years. And I think that this is the purpose analog for conversation in the personal. This is like the mirror of conversation, and that is cooperation. Cooperation, I think, is a holy thing. In the spiritual realm, we value people who can tap into higher states, and I think that's a great gift to their journey and to other people's journeys. But I think what we need to also value just as much and maybe more is the ability to cooperate. Think about the word cooperation. It's co-operation. To cooperate is to operate together. And egos don't do that very well. They do it superficially at times, and they oftentimes just don't do it at all. And the birthplace of the course was Bill saying there has to be a way in which people can cooperate rather than compete. What they were experiencing in their work lives that led to his Better Way speech was a lack of cooperation. And I've known lots of very spiritual people who are not particularly good at cooperation. Over the years, I thought, okay, there's that esteemed spiritual master. I wonder how well he can cooperate. Because cooperation is a kind of egolessness that I think is so essential, but I don't know how cultivated it is in our spiritual paths and spiritual traditions. But it's so important. And to me, cooperation, when it's done for real, it's kind of intoxicating. When it's real, it's not just one person caving and the other person like getting their way. When there's real cooperation, there's nothing better.
Yeah, 1,000%. Because what happens when you can have that true cooperation is you get into this state that it feels like a high. It honestly does. It feels like a high. And then you really are seeing each other, and the love pours out as a result. And it all kind of comes from that cooperation. And so if we are looking for spiritual advancement, what I love about the course, and I know I say this all the time, but what I love about the course is just how interpersonal it is. The course makes cooperation a spiritual virtue. And as you're saying, the whole origin of the course itself came from two people looking to get along. And I genuinely believe that, I mean, the course says that the problem with our world is separation. So, as I said in the intro, why wouldn't the healing of our world be through joining? but
Yeah.
we don't know how to do it. We are so bad at it.
We're
And
so bad at it.
that explains why our businesses fail, our marriages fail, we
Our
have
spiritual
trouble with
organizations break apart.
our spiritual organizations break apart. There's just, we look around and we see the disunity everywhere. And we have to come together and have a larger conversation about what does it really mean to get along. Because
Absolutely.
if we continue the way that we're going, the the world's already on fire and it will just continue to burn. So what's going to put the fire out? It's cooperation. It's our ability to get along.
Yeah, and I think in the spiritual realm, we need to see this as an absolutely essential form of egolessness. Like, can you access mystical states? Great. Are you a gifted thinker and writer or speaker? Great. But can you cooperate? That's where the rubber of egolessness hits the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where it requires this. What I love about these three legs is that they do build on each other. And so you will never get to that place of trying to achieve a larger purpose in the world until you can learn how to get along with people. And getting along with people requires all of that work, that hard work of getting the ego out of the way in all of the methodologies that the course prescribes. And it's not just the course. I don't want to say that like there's not methodologies out there in
Right,
cooperation
right, yeah.
that I mean there are all kinds of tools that work, but just coming back to that idea of getting your ego, being vigilant about getting your ego out of the way and focusing on nothing else.
And one little more thing that we probably don't have time for, but I feel like the spiritual ideal that we hold up, if you look at people who are considered spiritually advanced and revered as teachers and as realizers, so much of what we value is absolute certainty. I hear certain people talk, and even while I'm liking their message, the sense they convey is all perception is subjective, and yet somehow I speak as everything I say is presented as absolute fact. I never say in my opinion. I never admit uncertainty. I never say, I changed my mind about this because I've got an ego too. I'm uncertain too. I just present this absolute certainty. And you know what? In my experience, that kills cooperation because no human is that certain. Okay. And to cooperate, you have to bracket what you think you're certain about, which you may have some certainty about and some correctness about. You have to bracket that and also have an openness and say, you know what? I may be wrong. And you need to say, and you know what? I got that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Without all of that, you can't cooperate. And yet we have this spiritual ideal of absolute certainty, and they don't go together.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Because you think about in your personal relationships, how can you really get along if you've got someone else who's like, nope, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's going to change my mind. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's just
Yeah.
nowhere
We
to
know that
go
doesn't
with
work.
there's nowhere to go with that. And so we have to be willing to listen to each other and to recognize that um, there is a presence in our mind, i.e. the ego, that's working against cooperation. And what we want to do is we want to make what the ego is telling us about the other person. We want to project it onto them. And what we could get better at is saying, just because I thought that thing doesn't mean that it's right. And just because I want to see this other person in this way doesn't mean that it's not just my ego working against me. And I have a job here to do to rid this within my own mind, versus what we tend to do is just blindly take something out on the other person.
Yeah. And what I'm suggesting is let's ditch the spiritualized version of that. We know that in relationships where it's like, I'm right, you're wrong, that's that. We know it doesn't work, but we've got a spiritual version of that ideal where I stand strongly in my knowing, and I'm sorry, that's just that.
And how could that
That's
not bleed into your individual relationships? Yeah.
Yeah, and how can that spiritual version work? Like we all have egos. If you're walking around on two legs or if you're in a wheelchair, we all have egos and they're the problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
So in the final few minutes that we have, let's talk about the third leg of the stool, which is the path, meaning walking a path of development together. And that's a central component to your relationship. So what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, so when we talk about the third leg, just between you and I, the sense is we're walking the path of the course together, and central in that is doing the practice the workbook teaches us together. We often talk about it as being in the temple. And what I would say about that is just like the purpose element ideally will be present in a true joining, so this path element ideally is present too. Because we've been talking throughout that the problem is the ego, like we want the personal joining, but the ego's in the way. Well, how do you get it out of the way? You have to be engaged on a daily basis in walking a path of development. Ideally, you do that together. Like you're walking, I mean, you don't have to, but some amount of togetherness in that, I think, is a huge, huge help. Um, because it takes daily work over years to just like shave off bits of that ego. Egos are incredibly tenacious. And if you don't think yours is, it's because it's so successfully tenacious,
It
right?
takes daily work over years to change just a little bit.
Change a little bit of it. And so if you're going to join, which requires getting past your ego, you're going to have to walk a path of development, and it's hard to walk it alone. So even if you two have different paths, which is obviously, a total part of many holy relationships, you don't have to be on the same path, but ideally there's certain things you share and can do together and can walk together because you need the support of each other. There's a great amount of strength that comes from the unity, from joining together in it. And we need that because by ourselves, we're going to convince ourselves that our ego smells like roses and in fact does not exist. And it's just self-deception. So ideally, we do this together.
Yeah. And this is where it gets just a little bit tricky because oftentimes students will say, well, my partner is not a course student. And so how does that impact our relationship? And
Right.
we've always said it doesn't matter as long as they have some kind of foundational spiritual practice that you can share at the level of values, then that's enough. And I've just, it's tough because I've come to a place where I've realized within my own life that that wasn't enough. And walking a path, a specific path with a partner every day has been invaluable for me. And I just can't imagine my life without it. And the shorthand language that you develop from being together on a path, you can just say a lesson number and we know what that means. And um, so often we'll do like this for those of you who are just listening versus watching. There, I'm holding up three fingers, and for us that means this is Jesus. And by this is Jesus, it means like whatever it is that we're feeling in the moment should be overridden by the fact that there's something larger going on here, i.e. this is Jesus. And so without a shared path, you lose some of that. And
Yeah, okay. I guess we should talk about this. And I mean, you already are. Um, I would say a few things about that. One is that a genuine holy relationship partner has been given you by the Holy Spirit. And you have to just trust the hand you're dealt there, right? I mean, you did not create this. He arranged it. And you got to trust the hand you're dealt. And if the hand that you're dealt is you're not walking the path of the course together, then you accept that. Okay. And hopefully there are, as you just said, values that you can share and things that you can strengthen in each other actively in terms of walking a path beyond ego. Um, at the same time, you're right. There is, if that's the hand you've been dealt by the Holy Spirit, that you're both walking the path of the course, it's such a blessing. It's such an incredible blessing that you can strengthen each other in that. However, you do have to strengthen each other in that. It's the fact that you're both walking it is a potential, right? It's just a potential for what could happen. You then have to actualize that potential. So you have to then walk the path together. And, we've been working for years on really maximizing that potential. Um, and you have to not use your shared path as ammo, right? Where you use the principles and you throw them at the other person, like you're projecting. No, you're projecting. And, you use course quotes where you basically call upon the authority of your shared path, which in the case of the course carries divine authority for its students. You call upon divine authority to smite your partner, right? Knowing they accept that authority. So they're going to feel like doubly smitten, or smote or whatever.
yeah, smitten's not the word you're looking
Not the
for.
right word, right? So please don't do that.
Yeah, that just feels so icky and wrong. And yeah, to use the authority of your path to force the other person to concede in some way, just yuck. But I feel like it's so uncomfortable to say, because I know so many people who want a partner who's walking the path of the course with them. And right now, the course is it's not a mainstream spiritual path. And so finding someone who's a course student is hard. When I was single, I went onto a dating site and I was like, okay, well, surely I could find a student of a course here. And there was like one guy and I knew him and he was in the circle. And so it was like, oh, okay.
Must have been a surprise.
It's hard to find someone who, we're just acknowledging that to find someone who's good at all three of these legs is really, really difficult. We're not trying to say that it isn't, but at the same time, I think we are trying to start a conversation on the importance of infusing these things into your holy relationships, where you're, as a couple or as a unit, if you're not in a romantic relationship, are placing a value on getting along, on sharing a purpose, and on walking a path together. And when you can do that, and when you can do all three of these things well, it makes for a really beautiful relationship and a really beautiful life.
Yeah. And I think going back to that hand you're dealt concept, if there's lacks that are probably not going to be corrected in, one or two of those areas, still trust the hand that you're dealt. Trust that this person has been sent to you and that you're meant to basically get somewhere together. You're not going to have this perfect presence of all three legs, um, you know, with everyone. And it's, I think, very, very rare to have it with anyone. So just be grateful for however much you have, and don't think, well, because we don't share the course together, then this can't be.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And then just to end us where we began, I think that there's something so beautiful about two people coming together and the Holy Spirit entering their relationship and giving it a goal of holiness and a purpose to achieve together. And just the fact that two people can come together and there's a third presence, the third presence of the Holy Spirit within their relationship is just, gosh, what an amazing idea. And we always have help to lean on when we feel like we can't get to that higher perspective on our own. And that's what makes these relationships so great. And I really do genuinely believe that it is relationship, the focus on relationship, learning how to do this well. That is the next great spiritual frontier that will be the thing that heals our world. I don't see any other way. So,
I hope it's heading that way. It's such a beautiful thing that's so lacking in a world where everyone's individual ego is tearing the fabric of their relationships and separating them. If we can move into relationships like what we're talking about, it would be a different world.
yeah. And just on that last point, the holy relationship is meant to extend. I mentioned that in the intro. It's two people learning the lessons of love and forgiveness, and you have this little laboratory with the two of you. And then when you learn how to love and forgive, then you're capable of doing that with everyone. And God, I'm so struck by the incredible wisdom in that idea.
Yeah.
And it really, again, it feels like the recipe to heal our world. Robert, thank you. I hope this wasn't too uncomfortable for you. But yeah, this has been a great conversation. And if you're listening, I hope you got something out of it as well. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.